Hello friend, in this video I'm going to show you how to use Kubernetes Services in your computer for free with hands-on and the easy way so you can do that yourself later. You don't need to create a Kubernetes cluster in GCP, Azure or AWS. So let's talk about Kubernetes Service. Kubernetes Service is a method to expose a network application that is running in a pod or more pods in your cluster. In the simple way, it's just the way you share your application with the world. You have three types of service: Service IP, Service NodePort, and LoadBalancer. You have another one, that external name, but that's I never use in my 5 years working with Kubernetes, so I don't touch this. Okay, in the board, I have a Kubernetes cluster here, and you have 3 nodes. In these 3 nodes, you have a deployment, and this deployment have 3 pods. And we need to create a service so you can expose this application for anybody can somebody can access this application. So let's go to use the Service IP, the first example. In the Service IP, when you create the Service IP, they will go to create IP inside the network in the cluster, and everybody inside the cluster can access your application. But nobody else can access that if it is not inside the cluster. Okay, let's use the NodePort. The NodePort is a service. When you create that, they create a port that will be 3000 something. And every single node, if this cluster is a public cluster, they will go to have IP. And with this port, you can access with the IP. Example, you can put the IP for node 1, column, the port they go to create the service. You can access your application. So node 2 or node 3 IPs with the column, the port, you can access to. With the node port, the world can see your application, but the service IP not. So the last one, let's talk about the load balance. Load balance is different because they will go to create a public IP, like the public IP you have for, and they go to use this IP to share your application with the world. Example, you create the load balance, they create the public IP, you just put in the public IP, you reach the application. Anybody in the world can reach your application. But the load balance, if you use a private cluster, they don't go to expose in the public. You need to create an ingress to expose your application if your company use a private cluster. So let's go back to take this load balancing here. So you have a service, and you create a service, and you want to expose our application with a domain, like example, DevOpsThiago.com. I want to use that for expose my application. So you can use the ingress. So you just put the ingress in here, and you can configure the ingress with the ports, like for your service, with the service ports, and you can expose your application with the NS domain. So let's start talking the board, and let's go to this demo. Okay, let's go to my repository, git clone, and that's my repository. And all the links you need will be my blog post. And the required for this demo, you need to have a Docker and kind of up and running in your computer. I have videos about that, and the links will be in the description. So next thing, let's open let's CD my YouTube channel, CD 25. That's the lessons you have in here, and code, and open VS Code. Okay, in the VS Code, I have my make file. In the make file, you have all the commands I go to use right here. And later, when you want to do that, you have all the commands I use in here, and you have the islands just to use it. Okay, first step, let's create our Kubernetes cluster in the local machine. So make create cluster. So when they create the cluster, I go to show the project. We have this configuration that's you go to use to create a Kubernetes cluster, and I put it like this information here just for share the node ports you go to use in this demo, so you can have the access in the computer. Let's go to the deployment first, and the one thing is Nginx with the latest imaging. So you have the service and the labels. That's the important thing for us. So you have a cluster IP. The cluster IP go to share the application. You need to remember that Kubernetes work with labels. So for reference the deployment, you need to use the label. So you go to use the app service, And if you go to deployment, you have the same label, app service. And when you create the cluster, when you create the deployment, you go to have the same thing for the pods. So you know, like you need to use app service to point to the service there. So we have the ClusterIP. The difference for the load balance and NodePort is just one thing, the type. In the NodePort, they have here a number for the NodePort. That's the same ones you're using here in the kind you export that, so you can have the access for the NodePort when you do this demo. The load balancing, when you use a kind, you don't have the IP. You need to use the Metal LB to create IPs inside the cluster, but that is another topic. Today, I just go to talk about service. Okay, I show you all the files, so let's go to the next step. So next step will be create deployment. Let's just create a deployment, and let's run the command for create a deployment. So kubectl create deployment service image nginx latest, put the port, number the replicas. You go to export that's for YAML. You drive run client. That's don't go to create right now. Just export the YAML for us. So you have the YAML here. So just create the YAML here. You're good. Okay, next step. Let's apply this. Apply, and deployment. After that, let's check. So let's go to create a deployment, and the commands in here, and the same command you have for in the make file. If you see here, the same command here, so you can check that later and do by yourself. Okay, let's check the deployment. So make list deployment. So we have a deployment, and you have one pod running. So next one's like create service, and let's start with ClusterIP. So create ClusterIP. They're going to create the file for us. Let's go to see. That's a ClusterIP you just creating here right now, and you can see it's just a v1. It's just a file with the version. The kind will be a service, and you have the label, the same label we have there. So the ports, that's the port you're going to use in the service, and that's the port target is that the container port. So you go choose that's be the container port, and the select app. Okay, they create a service file for us, and the type will be ClusterIP. That's the same way, but remember the label. Always remember that's the label, and you need to put the right port for the container, the same ones you have in the deployment. You check in here, container port is 80, so that's the port you go to expose with the service. If you have another container here, if I have another port, you need to create a service for that. Okay, let's create for the NodePort. So create NodePort. Okay, you will create the file for NodePort, and you have the IP version is v1. The kind service is the same file. You have the ClusterIP. The only different, you have the type will be NodePort in here. The name is different. But if you go to my cluster here, you need to put the NodePort. You just need to put the NodePort because I don't want to use the random ones, and that's the same one we expose when you create this cluster. So you can go to the cluster here and see that's the number, and that's the file you go to use. You create the demo files just for you guys can see, but the ones I go to use is those ones I have in here, the NodePort, and they have the right port in here. Okay, let's create the last ones, the load balancing. So create SVC and load balance. So they go to create the file for load balance, and you see here is the same. You just have the new name, and the type will be load balancing here. Okay, let's create all the services. So apply SVC, the ClusterIP, NodePort, and load balance. Let's check all the services you create with this file right now. So list SVC. Okay, you can see now you have the 3 services create for us. The first one, let's check the service cluster IP, and they create an IP inside the cluster, and you can access that with this IP inside the cluster for any application you have inside the cluster. So the next one is load balance, and that will be always pending for now. And if you use a matter LB, so they go to create some IPs inside and go to give some IPs so you can use that. So this is a subject for another video. But another one, you have the NodePort, and the NodePort, you have this number here. That's the port you just create for the services. So let's try to reach this. So let's access the NodePort here. And put the local host. That's my computer here. And the port 30128. So you have Nginx here. So we have access for Nginx in the NodePort. So let's go to the service again, make list SVC. Now let's port for the ClusterIP just for you can see that's in the browser. So make port forward the port 888. If you go to the browser right now, and let me refresh here, for the localhost port 888, they're going to show the welcome page for Nginx, and you are using our ClusterIP service because you port forward that. So you go to connect to this service and port forward on our computer. So you check the load balance connection and you check the ClusterIP connection. But the load balance, we don't have the IP because this is a private cluster, and you need another tools to create an IP in here, external IP, so you can have access for that. But different types of service you have in Kubernetes. But remember, that's not the way you need to deploy your application production. You need to use Ingress to do that, so you can have a DNS name. So nobody go to use a number or a number with some columns or a number with IP to access your application. So the right way to expose your application for the customers, you need to use Ingress. So I'm going to create a video about that in the future. That's the way how to use service in Kubernetes for free on your computer. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe my channel, and I see you in the next one.